Hey, welcome everyone to the Story Trading Weekly Meetup. Got an awesome presentation for you tonight by yours truly. First, a disclaimer, Story Trading is not an investment advisor. Investing in securities involves significant risk of loss. This event is being recorded, will be made available to our VIP members for a period of 7 days, and then we'll put it up on social media. For those who are watching on social media, what is story trading? It's the art of practice of understanding market pricing through the 4 pillars of fundamentals, catalyst, sentiment, and technicals. We collaborate as a community on WhatsApp and on Zoom, and we have an app coming up. Make sure to go to our website, either sign up to become a VIP to collaborate with us now or to sign up for a wait list for the app. We have VIP picks we're going to be talking about. RELL, R-E-L-L, is a VIP pick. This was actually brought to the community by Julian on November 8th. It's been up 24% since he brought it up. Now, since then, we've had multiple presentations on this, multiple fact-finding missions, and a lot of crowdsourced collaboration on it. And I'm going to be able to tell a little bit more about what's going on. The goal at Story Trading is to understand the story behind the trade. Here you can see a long-term chart from 1985. These are monthly candles. So you can see the history of the stock and how recently it's been taking off. There you go, the monthly candles. There's our 4 pillars. And then more recently here, we're going to point to, this is when Julian introduced it to our community right there. We selected as a VIP pick on that date there in December. Blowout ER, what's that, January 5th. And we had an emergency presentation that Julian was so gracious to give us on a quick basis the day after ER, just the next day, where he gave us his pitch on January 6th. And then Julian was also able to set us up with a management meeting, which we had last week, January 13th. That was with the CEO, the COO, and the executive VP of the Power Group as well, Gregory Peliquin. So we've been looking at this a lot. I have lots to share with you that I put together as a nice digestible story for everybody. And you know what really is piquing my attention is with this rotation that we're seeing from growth to value. So in today's rocky markets, is RELL an ideal combination of growth and value? Is it? So I think it might be. Check out what the market thinks so far. Since December 8th, RELL is up when we chose it as a VIP pick, up 24%. Here's how it's done against the rest of the market during that period. SPY up almost 2%, NASDAQ down 6%, and ARK-K, which is really an excellent indicator of how risk assets are doing, down 20%. RELL is up 24%. So it's really standing out among a lot of the stocks that retail investors trade in. Even story trading stocks are down, micro caps, biotech, speculative stocks, but RELL, exact opposite, not down 20, but up 24%. So we've had a lot of, I'm going to jump in and give you guys an overview of the company that go into the 4 pillars. But first, a shout out to Sanjay, who won Researcher of the Week. We just talked about him on Twitter Spaces. He's really done a ton of due diligence on this stock. He helped us prepare with a great Q&A for management last week. Also want to give a shout out to Chris Tuttle, who's been very helpful researching this from a financial modeling perspective. I'll have some information to share with you here. But for those of you who don't know the story, here we go. RELL, Richardson Electronics is an engineering services company with a 75-year history. They are profitable and growing with a dividend. Wow, really? And not only that, but they have strong fundamentals, low valuations. But here's the key: they are in growing hot sectors, right? So this growth in these hot sectors, combined with that low valuation, that's what captured my attention. And they have a dividend. You kidding me? Now, this is how we ran across it. We put kind of a challenge out there. Let's find the next heir. And Julian came across it because we're looking at companies that have semiconductor exposure. So Richardson Electronics, RELL, does have some semiconductor exposure. But as we were doing this due diligence, we discovered that the real story here is in the green energy sector in something called, referring to it as green energy batteries. It's not really a battery, but it's a good way to think of it. It's actually ultra capacitors, also known as supercapacitors. So if you hear any of these words, they're completely interchangeable, supercapacitors and ultra capacitors. And these are devices that are replacing a lot of lithium ion batteries. So we'll talk about that in a second. Now, what RELL does, they are engineering these ultra capacitors, right? They're not manufacturing them from scratch. They're buying ultra capacitors and then modifying them to make them custom made for particular use cases. Now, what are those use cases? Wind, 5G, EV, locomotives, EV charging, even EV cars, solar. So we're going to get into all of that. Quick view, though, of the fundamentals ending, weird ending date, November 27th. But check this out. Year over year numbers, revenue 42 million to 54 million. Operating income 0.9 million to 4.5 million year over year. EPS 5 cents to 30 cents year over year. And sequentially 20 cents to 30 cents. These are the numbers I saw, by the way. Man, I think I tripled my position after this report came out just on those headline numbers. Backlog increased sequentially from 126 million to almost 147 million. They have a 40 million cash position and a 6-cent quarterly dividend. They're guiding for at least 220 million full year. That's like ending May 27th. There's the weird dates again. And guiding for 90 to 95 cent EPS, which I think they may be sandbagging just a little bit. Let's look at some charts here with the fundamentals. You can see here since 2018, this is a 12 months trailing revenue over a span of 4 years, and that's going up. It smooths that out, right? Gives you a truer picture of revenue when you look at the TTM. Same thing with the operating income. You can see that they're hitting highs here over the last 4 years. And you can see the EV to revenue ratio is not even 1 yet. The EV to EBITDA is at 11.8, I think, 11.8. So what is a ultra capacitor or supercapacitor? I like the term supercapacitor better. It just sounds a lot more exciting and it sounds new. And in fact, the way they're using them are, so our supercapacitors, a superior form of energy storage. And here you can see how they work. I'm not about to explain to you exactly how it works, but I can tell you that this device here is replacing lead acid batteries in a lot of use cases because they last 5 to 7 times longer. 5 to 7 times longer than lead acid batteries. That's a big, big deal. So stay tuned. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a nice video explanation of how that works. Before that, let's talk about these use cases where Richardson Electronics RELL is gaining a lot of traction. Those big revenue numbers that you saw increasing sequentially, especially that backlog, has to do with the green energy sector, the supercapacitor growth. So wind turbines. This is one of the main areas where they're seeing a lot of growth. They have a device here called the Ultra 3000, specifically designed for GE wind turbines. Now, these batteries, there used to be lead acid batteries up there, and they got to be replaced like every 18 to 24 months. So now they can put these batteries up there because it's very expensive to replace them, to go up and climb, a lot of man hours you got to pay. Now here they can replace a battery and then not do it for another 14 to 15 years instead of 2 years. That's a big deal. They have deals with the top 4 owner operators of all of the GE windmills, top 4 owner operators of GE windmills in North America. And that alone is a $25 million, I think it could be a $25 million annual business for them. They gave that guidance. I'm not sure if that includes growing beyond the 4 or just those 4. But it's a big place for them. So that's wind turbines. Now you would think green energy, wind. What about solar? Guess what? Coming soon, man. If you paid, not a lot of talk on this, but if you looked at the transcript in the last earnings release the other day, they said there's growth in applications for solar, and they will be announcing in Q3 a partnership with one of the largest builders of solar and wind farms in North America. Interesting, because across all of our due diligence and even the private, interview management we had last week, we didn't talk much about solar, but this was in the earnings report. So not only are they growing very fast in wind, but some sort of big deal that's supposed to be announced in the next few months. I think some people may have missed that. Now, what else? Where else are they growing really big? 5G. these 5G towers have lead acid batteries, very similar use case as the wind turbines. They have to be changed every 2 to 3 years. Now, in this case, you go up and then they don't need to be changed for 10 or 15 years. Guess what? They are doing pilot programs, Ultra Gen 3000. So these batteries, they're not like universal for every use case. They have to modify them for every use case. So the other one is the Ultra 3000. This is Ultra Gen 3000. It's under beta testing, which began in December with T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon beta testing. And early beta tests, they said, look good. They expect at least one large production order, meaning at least one of these three from at least one of them in the second half of 2022. So this is another big growth driver for RELL with their super capacitors. Now, locomotives, they have, these are electric machines. They got batteries on there. So these batteries, guess what? They're in talks with 2 companies, including Progress Rail, which is a division of CAT. They already got an initial order, I believe, from Progress Rail, $800,000 order in Q2. And they said just these 2 companies they're talking to is a $5 to $6 million annual opportunity. That's with EV locomotives. But guys, we are not done yet. Look at this, electric vehicles and charging. They have a deal with a company in Vietnam called VinFast, all right? They are selling some sort of ultra capacitor parts, not only for the car, but EV charging. In fact, most of the opportunity, they said, for EV is in the EV charging. I can't begin to tell you exactly how this works, okay? But in the Q2 conference call comments, they said EV just boomed in the second quarter. We have design wins for 5 different customers. And again, one of them being VinFast. We booked 4 very large orders for EV charging. There's a multi-million-dollar backlog in EV. And wow, that's multi-million-dollar backlog in EV. And that's not even where they said the biggest surprising growth is coming from. That's from the wind turbines, number 1. And I think the 5G deals with Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, number 2. They have this all the way in number 3 at multi-million. I don't know. I think they may be sandbagging there or something. So that's interesting. So let's take a little bit of a break, guys, and play this video for you that explains what ultra capacitors, super capacitors are. I'm going to play this right now. If there's a problem with the audio, let me know in chat.
This episode is brought to you by Brilliant. Click the link in the description below. With Tesla's Battery Day event not too far off, and their acquisition of Maxwell Technologies last year, I thought it was worth taking a closer look at supercapacitors. Some believe that supercapacitors might be integrated into the future of EVs. But what exactly is a supercapacitor? And what makes them so different from batteries? Are they really the future of energy storage? I'm Matt Farrell. Welcome to Undecided. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of whether supercapacitors can really change energy storage all on their own, it's worth taking a look at what they are and how they're different from something like a lithium-ion battery. Both batteries and capacitors are a method of storing energy, but lithium-ion batteries rely on chemical reactions to store and release their energy. It's made up of a positive and negative side, which are called the cathode and the anode. These 2 sides are submerged in a liquid electrolyte and are separated by a micro-perforated separator, which allows ions to pass through. When the battery charges and discharges, those ions flow back and forth between the cathode and the anode. During this process, the battery is heating up, expanding, and contracting, and these kind of reactions degrade the battery over time, giving batteries a limited lifespan. But one benefit of a battery technology is a very high specific energy, or energy density, so it can store a lot of energy for later use. But capacitors are different. They don't rely on chemical play in order to function. Instead, they store potential energy electrostatically. Capacitors use a dielectric, or insulator, between their plates to separate the collection of positive and negative charges that are building on each plate. It's this separation that allows the device to store energy and release it quickly. It's basically capturing static electricity. One benefit of this is that a 3-volt capacitor now will still be a 3-volt capacitor in 15 to 20 years' time, while a battery may lose voltage capacity over time and use. And unlike a battery, a capacitor has much higher power throughput, so it can charge and discharge in a fraction of the time. But they have a very low specific energy. It's good for very small bursts of power. And that's where supercapacitors enter the scene. They start to bridge the gap between battery and capacitor. The concept of a supercapacitor is not a new thing though. In fact, in 1957, the first supercapacitor device was created by General Electric, but there aren't any known commercial applications from that time. In 1966, Standard Oil accidentally discovered the double-layer capacitor while working on fuel cells. But it wasn't until the late 1970s that the Japanese company NEC began commercially offering the first supercapacitor for computer memory backup. In fact, while we commonly refer to many products as supercapacitors or ultracapacitors, those two terms are used interchangeably and really depends on what company is producing it and what they want to call it. For the most part, it's really just a trademark thing. In the 1990s, products such as Econ's PS Cap, which is a starter for diesel trains, began hitting the market and pushing the boundaries of energy storage and capacitor applications. Companies like Maxwell Technologies, Murata, and Tecate generally dominate the supercapacitor field. But recent developments in graphene-based capacitors are once again pushing the growth of supercapacitor efficiency and application. But I'll talk more about that a bit later. First, we need to talk about how a supercapacitor works, and how it's different than a regular capacitor, because it's kind of cool. It's starting to venture towards a battery's design and use an electrolyte on either side of an insulator. When current is applied, ions build up on either side of the insulator and create a double layer of charge. What makes a supercapacitor truly superior to a normal capacitor, or even a battery, is the distance between the metal plates. In a normal capacitor, the distance is around 10 to 100 microns, and a micron is 1/1000th of a millimeter. But a supercapacitor, that distance is narrowed to 1/1000th of a micron, and that smaller distance leads to a larger electric field, or more energy. Not to mention, the carbon-coated plates on supercapacitors increase the available surface area for storage capacity by up to 100,000 times. That's a lot more energy available for use than a normal capacitor. So what are these power-hungry little titans used for? We're really just at the beginning of supercapacitor applications, but in general they've been found to have the biggest potential for application in hybrid transportation. Cue the Tesla Maxwell speculation here. Toyota, Peugeot, Mazda, and even Lamborghini have all released models of vehicles that use some combination of supercapacitors and conventional lithium-ion batteries. Believe it or not, even though Tesla invested $200 million to purchase Maxwell Technologies, Elon Musk has said his focus is not on expanding the use and development of Maxwell's supercapacitors for Tesla vehicles, but instead their battery manufacturing technology. However, cars like Toyota's hybrid R concept car and Lamborghini's high-powered Sion are using supercapacitors for a very specific role: power regeneration systems during deceleration. In other words, when cars are slowing, the energy generated from that action is stored by supercapacitors on board and later used for acceleration, saving batteries for less strenuous actions. It's taking advantage of a supercapacitor's superior power throughput. A fantastic example of how effective supercapacitors can be is right in Switzerland, where a fleet of buses will be exposed to charging stations at a variety of stops along their route. Just 15 seconds can top the energy charge off, and only a few minutes would be needed to give it a full charge from nothing. With frequent top-offs, it makes up for the lack of energy density and storage. And because supercapacitors can draw lower current over a period of a few minutes at a time, this puts less stress on the grid. However, supercapacitors still can't compete with lithium-ion batteries when it comes to that high specific energy and long-term energy storage. But despite that, some companies are making progress in projects that are poised to make supercapacitors more universally applicable. You may have watched my recent videos on graphene and carbon nanotubes. Well, those materials are actually playing a role in the future of supercapacitors. Companies like Nawa Technologies and Skeleton Technologies have taken supercapacitors to the next level by incorporating graphene into the coating on the metal plates. They've taken this and expanded the conventional use of supercaps into markets like components for e-motorcycles, spacecrafts, and wave energy technology. Graphene provides the next generation of supercapacitors with an interesting array of improvements. In particular, graphene offers substantially more surface area, giving supercapacitors even more capacity for energy storage. But in addition to that, graphene is ultralight and has unique elasticity and is incredibly strong. In fact, Nawa Technologies, Skeleton, and other supercapacitor battery companies have already found major applications for their graphene-based supercapacitors. Skeleton's products can be found helping power major tram systems in big European hubs like Warsaw and Mannheim. But it's not just trams and urban transportation that Skeleton has found a use for. They're working with the European Space Agency on a potential approach for sudden power usage on satellites and spacecraft, as well as developing an ultracapacitor module for use in wind turbines to help manage the blade pitch control. Nawa's Nawa Racer, an e-motorcycle that packs a serious punch, is showing the world what an ultracapacitor lithium-ion hybrid power system can do in smaller vehicles, by making this bike incredibly efficient. While the bike itself isn't being rolled out for commercialized sale, what it's doing is proving to other companies interested in the potential of supercapacitors that this technology is groundbreaking. The bottleneck in absorbing all of the regenerative braking power is the battery, which has a very slow charge rate. The supercapacitor combo allows it to recoup about 80 to 90% of the energy from braking and then immediately reuse that for acceleration. But wait, there's more. Eaton's supercapacitors are built to pair with battery systems. The Angazu Optoelectronics fast-charging laptop battery system, EarthDOS Supercap battery mixture for e-bikes and motorcycles, and Zapco's e-scooters are all examples of small power management companies that are experimenting with application of supercapacitors in their technology. With all of these examples, there doesn't seem to be any mass movement towards the replacement of batteries with supercapacitors in everyday technology. So why is that? Well, the short answer is that supercapacitors, while superior to traditional capacitors in their ability to store and release energy, are still not able to replace the function of conventional lithium-ion batteries, mainly because lithium-ion batteries pack a punch that supercapacitors can't, in the form of specific energy or energy density. Lithium-ion batteries have about a 250 watt-hours per kilogram, versus ultracapacitors at about 20 watt-hours per kilogram. But even companies that focus on supercapacitor technology, like Skeleton Technologies, admit that a hybridization of lithium-ion and supercapacitor-driven power systems could propel electric technologies into the next era. And the reality is that most of the applications that we see today are some sort of combination between the two. When a supercapacitor is placed in parallel with a traditional battery, we see drastic changes in the battery lifespan. The process essentially works like this. The presence of a supercapacitor in parallel with a regular battery basically just reduces the workload and intensity level that the battery has to endure, giving the battery more longevity. In some research, it's shown that it can extend the life of a battery by up to 4 times. So why aren't we seeing this in all EVs? Well, battery technology in EVs is currently good enough, and it's getting better for how we're using it. The expense for going down this path may not be worth the investment. For technology that's nearly 65 years old, supercapacitors have yet to really find their place in electric technology. But it seems that in unison with lithium-ion batteries, and with graphene being applied more and more commonly, supercapacitors are slowly building themselves an important role in hybrid technology. And that's something that's easy to overlook. The importance of streamlining and improving efficiency of current technologies by adding, not replacing a component to the mix. Supercapacitors could play that role, making lithium-ion batteries, which have high energy density, more useful over longer and longer periods of time. The potential is there for supercapacitors to take charge of the energy storage game and redefine what energy storage really is. We still have ways to go, but it will be very interesting to see how they're applied, not just to electric cars, buses, and other transportation, but to renewable energy and the grid as well. And if you'd like to dive a little deeper on the underlying principles of supercapacitors, like static charge and how protons and electrons move, attract and repel each other, check out the electricity and magnetism course at this episode.
All right, guys. Thank you for. All right, guys. Thanks for listening to that. That was a nice little video to explain ultra and supercapacitors. So now what I want to show you, now that you had the background on what this company is doing, they're taking that technology and they're growing their revenue real quick in solar, in EV locomotives, wind, all those use cases we talked about, EVs, EV charging, 5G. How's that impacting their fundamentals? So here's a model that Chris Tuttle from our community put together, and you can see here, this is already from company's guidance, 220 million. And I guess from that backlog, Chris is forecasting 275 million. Now, this is not my forte. I jump all the way to the bottom. And with that increase of 220 to 275, these are the fair values he believes the stock should be at. It's now at $15. So you can see $20, $30, $40 here in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So let's move on to our next pillar, catalyst. So management has stated, we don't have our animation, but management stated upside optionality above and beyond the revenue guidance will come from the green energy space specifically and 5G. Again, we mentioned Q3 partnership, one of the largest builders of solar and wind farms. That's hopefully coming here in the next few months. Additional wind turbine orders. The 5G pilot program, getting a production order in the second half of the year. These are the catalysts that can really move the stock. Ramping up of locomotive orders, because so far it was just the initial orders they were talking about while they're still in talks for production orders. Expansion with EV and Q3 earnings. We just had it, so another 3 months for that. I want to get into sentiment here. Sentiment is obviously very bullish in terms of the green energy segment. Even with the market crash, the EV stocks are still doing great. Green energy doing great. Rotation to value could be a real tailwind for this. Again, could be seen as an ideal and rare mix of a growth and value stock at the same time. But there are a few negatives with the sentiment. Now, these negatives don't necessarily mean don't buy the stock. It means be aware for the reasons why the stock may be undervalued, right? So let's say people are calculating, pure fundamentalists are calculating, hey, fair value is 30. Why is it 15? Well, here are the reasons. Because it's not a pure play company. There's several divisions. They have thousands of products with non-charismatic management. This stuff matters and can affect market values. They continue to invest in a part of a business I didn't talk about. It's a health-related part of their business, which is losing money. And if they close that part of the business, their earnings would be even much, much bigger. So people are like, why the hell do they keep investing money into this money-losing segment? So people say, hey, this company may deserve a discount because of that. Also, this stock hasn't broken out in 40 years. Well, it was publicly traded, but in 75 years. So why would it now? Just look at the history. Also, we're going into a market correction. There could be multiple compression. And one of the issues in terms of meeting that backlog is they're having trouble finding enough good engineers to meet demand. So now it's important to know what those items are, because any kind of catalyst which reverses any of this will be a strong boon for the stock where you can see a rapid re-rating. So that's on sentiment. We got a chart from Rex on technicals. He created this a couple of weeks ago. He said no chart, no change to his outlook here. 15s is really the key breakout. And he says it's a very difficult place to break out. It's an all-time trend breakout. If it does break out, it's very bullish. You can take the stock to the 20s pretty quickly. But he does believe it's kind of going to be difficult to top that 15. And if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't break 15, he could see a pullback technically to the 10s or 11s. That's Rex's point of view on technicals. So now let's go into a summary of our 4 pillars. Fundamentals. So cheap and growing. It could be, quote unquote, worth $30 already. It may be worth $30 according to the financials from Chris. Catalyst, backlog, a lot of backlog there, and commentary from the company points to many new deals being announced in 2022. So lots of opportunity for press releases to come out. We just talked about sentiment. They're in a hot growing sector, but the management, not very charismatic. The history not breaking out, not very exciting. They're not great storytellers. We interviewed management, and it's like they're a bunch of engineers, right? So they're not very charismatic, not great storytellers. And the macro environment for stocks is kind of mixed right now. And technicals we just went through, we're near a key resistance level of $15. Market won't make it easy to break that. So you know what? We like to rate these. I like to rate these on a scale of 1 to 5. So fundamentals, I give it a 5. Catalyst, I give it a 5. Sentiment, I'll go 3.5 because of those issues with non-charismatic management and there may be lack of focus potentially just on the ultra capacitors. Technically, could kind of go either way, but Rex lately had told me he's a little more bullish on it. So instead of going at a 2.5, I'll go 3.5. So all in all, that's an 85% score on the pillars. Hey, if you're not a VIP member already, you can join us in the RELL research group. And with that, I'm going to stop my share and open it up for Q&A.